Justin Harris from TreponaNutrition.com and Myoplasmic.com. Just got done training back. I'll let you.
I just deadlift a lot. I'm not. It was hard.
Yes, that's Ben Pollock. So yeah, Ben's about 10 days out of the Michigan, 11 days out of the Mr. Michigan, and then possibly the Junior USA's, Junior Nationals. They're all out of order this year. So I know how many weeks out everything is. I just don't know what show it is at this point. So 11 days out training back. We did basically lat focus. Ben does kind of an abbreviated routine in our power building style, which you can find a lot of information on at myoplasmic.com, where it's not really the bro split. Ben comes from a powerlifting background, so it's more along the style of like Jordan Peters or DC training. We call it the myoplasmic growth protocol, which we think is of course, the best version of the higher frequency power building program. So I'll let you say what we did today.
Okay, yeah, so like Justin was saying, this is very similar to those other protocols. Personally, I've not used Jordan Peters' methods, but I have used, the dog crap stuff, and this is, we say it's abbreviated. It's still, I would say, very high volume because
the total workload.
The total workload, yeah. So I'm training 6 days a week. I have extra sessions at night, to pump up the showy muscles. And then I have cardio on top of that again. So there's a lot of activity, and I don't want to pretend it's low volume, but it is probably lower than what you're used to for a typical high frequency. Yeah, high frequency of abbreviated, I think, would be the best way to put it. So today was. I've switched things up a little bit for my off season, as we get into prep, where it's a little bit more lighter focus, a little bit more body part centric. So normally today would be lats, and then I would have some hip focused squatting movement. Instead, because it is, very close to a show, we're doing just all back training today, and to hopefully help just a little bit extra with recovery. So we warmed up with what John Meadows, who I worked with previously, and who does own one of my sponsored companies, Granite. He has a movement called Movement X, just a nice warm up where you're doing kind of an X on a cable cross down, and it just gets some blood pumping through your lats. And then we did some lat pullovers on the hamstring curl machine from Elite FTS, which one of the feedback I've gotten from a national level judge is that Terry's is one of the smaller muscle groups that I need to bring up, and so we found that focuses for me and also for Justin pretty well on hitting the Terry's. It's surprisingly intense, even with 25, 50 pounds. So those were kind of the warm-up movements we went through, and then we started the actual training. So I did, and my training is based on mostly on Justin's, protocols, but then I've added in some powerlifting methods of my own. And so we started off with chest-supported rows, and we did kind of a, not exactly sure what you would call it. It's a fatigue drop method where you're doing sets of a given number of reps until you can't hit that rep range anymore. So we got 3 good working sets in on that. I think it was 6 or 7 sets total, including the warm up. So that was pretty good. I think I went up to 215 there. Then we went over to lat pull downs. Justin did in front of the neck. I did behind the neck. For whatever reason, this is one of the things that I really try to focus on when I'm designing my program, when I'm, for whatever my goal is. I really try and focus on individual anatomy and individual variation. And so for me, for whatever reason, I have better shoulder mobility when I'm behind the neck. So whether it's lat pull downs, whether it's presses, even to some extent my rear delt work, I do better when the center of gravity is behind my neck. And so I did behind the neck pull downs. Justin did in front, and we did a myo rep protocol there. So if you're familiar with the dog crep training method, where you have a rest pause set, you'll do a set, and then you'll take a few breaths and you'll do another set, and then take a few breaths and do a third set. This is similar, except there's no given number of sets. You just go until you can't hit your rep range. So I think there I used 200 pounds on pull downs for my first set of 10, and then I did 3 sets of 4 after that with about 20 seconds in between. So those were both good small increments for me over my last training session, which is nice considering I'm 10 days out, 10 weeks out of a national show. So that was the majority of the lat movements. We moved on then to trap bar deadlifts using the Kabuki Strength trap bar, which holds quite a bit more than your normal trap bar. That's why we use it. And So there I worked up to, I believe it was 850 for a double. I hit 800 for a double before that, so that was a nice small PR for me, but very encouraging at this point in prep to be hitting that. I am planning on attempting 1,000 pounds on that shortly after North American. So I think, again, just based on today's training, I think that'll move pretty well. So I was very happy with that. And then Justin finished up with dumbbell shrugs. I got to do those after because I took quite a while on those pulls, but I was on the floor for a little bit afterwards. But very good session today. Typically, I train, like I said, 6 days a week. If you count cardio, you count everything, it's close to 15 total sessions a week. So I'll typically have 1 or 2 bad ones. Yesterday was not my best session ever, so it was very nice to kind of get some momentum and to build back up as we get closer to the show.
And so to kind of go a little more detail on the myoplasmic growth protocol and what we're calling abbreviated or higher frequency training, it's kind of a mix of, if you do your standard progressive overload, you're looking to get stronger in movements, obviously progressively overload. The problem is that just going straight progressive overload leads you to just moving more weight however you can move the weight in the movement, which doesn't always correlate directly to being stronger in the muscle. A lot of movements you can get stronger just by being more biomechanically advantageous in the movement. And so what we end up kind of doing, and like I said, not to belabor the point, but you can go to myoplasmic.com and see all this, but it's a mix of hypertrophy and progressive overload, where your progressive overload tends to be more focused on movements where you have no choice but to get stronger by making the muscle stronger. And so something like a trap bar deadlift, the primary mover is going to be the muscles of the mid and upper back. Your hamstrings and glutes are going to be involved also, but almost by necessity, if you use your hamstrings and glutes more than your back, you're not going to be as strong as you could be. So you're not going to be able to progressive overload. You can compare that to other movements like a cheat curl or something. You could easily get stronger on a cheat curl by using your biceps less, just by swinging the bar more. So we try to kind of focus the progressive overload on movements where you have no choice, but if you're getting stronger, you're making the muscle stronger. And then we do to more hypertrophy and even intensity modifiers on movements where we're focusing on isolating a particular muscle. Like in the chest supported rows, we're really trying to hit the lats. And so in that, we're removing any swinging, any motion, just to isolate the lat. And rather than focus purely on progressive overload with increasing the weight, we did things like the, what did you call those, the way you handle those sets?
Which ones?
The chest supported row.
I called it a fatigue drop.
Yeah, fatigue drop. So a way to increase the workload, increase the intensity without allowing yourself to cheat to get more weight. And then we also do things like the myo reps, which we did on lat pull downs, which is another way to increase the workload and create a level of progressive overload where you do your first set of 10 or 12 and then you take some breaths and then do a set of 4, take some breaths, a set of 4, take some breaths, a set of 4. And so there still is the chance to cheat, to swing, to get the additional reps, but that really only happens on that last set of the myo reps. So it kind of forces you to work on the muscle rather than just the weight until the very end, and then that slap kind of comes in. And so I think that's kind of what I'm most excited about with the myoplasmic growth protocol and the stuff we're doing, is that I think we've really found a way to implement all the best strategies of traditional bodybuilding and the bro split and pump training and sarcoplasmic growth with all the best benefits of progressive overload and getting strong. And I think Ben's a perfect example of what we've been able to do with it, because I don't know that there's ever been a 1-year progress like Ben has had in the last year.
Yeah, so we're thinking, I was my last show I stepped on stage at 184, and so this morning, I'm pretty close to contest ready, 10 days or so, and I was 248, and then I was 252 before, so that's somewhere between 65, 70 pounds in a year, which is pretty nice. And I also wanted to touch on one of the things that Justin mentioned about the myoplasmic growth protocol. One of the things I really like about it, and this goes back to the movement selection, is very flexible. Usually you look at I call them cookie cutter routines, right? Because they're designed not for an individual, but for kind of the general population. And while that works well at beginner levels, once you start to reach that intermediate plateau where you're really trying to push to the advanced or the elite levels, I think you need to get a lot more individualized. And so our method really allows for that. And one example is, for me, I will tend to cheat too much. Coming from the powerlifting background, our goal is to move the weight, however you move the weight. When we're doing kind of those sarcoplasmic or hypertrophy focused movements, I'll tend to cheat. And so what I do is choose movements where I have some type of feedback, whether it's neurological, whether it's kinesthetic, whatever, that I know I've kept to some standard of form. So for example, on the chest supported rows, I make sure that every rep, if I count the rep, it means I heard the top of the machine clang against the chest support, right? And I know that, okay, I did a full range of motion, that was a good rep. If I don't do that, I don't count the rep. With the behind the neck lat pull downs, I have to touch the back of my skull, that little indentation right above C8, C7. If I don't do that, my range of motion wasn't enough, I don't count the rep. And so that holds me accountable. People like Justin, they've been, they come from a bodybuilding background. They have a better mind-muscle connection. They have better kinesthetic awareness. They don't need that type of feedback, but I do. And so that's kind of why I use it.
What's diet been like for him, like off season?
Well, Ben's diet is, well, we didn't start with this, but Ben had basically the perfect off season as far as what I like to do with the diet, which is rather than focus on growth and building muscle, we focus on building a metabolism, because the more food you can get down, the more you can grow. So really, my approach is to focus on increasing food intake without getting fat, and a forced byproduct of that is muscle growth. And so Ben right now, well, up until very recently, about a week ago, he was on 3 high carb days a week, where on those days he gets 1,200 grams of carbohydrates. What's your protein, like 50 a meal? I can't remember.
45.
40, so protein's 45 grams a meal for 6 meals, 1,200 grams base carbs, but that 6th meal is allowed to be a cheat meal where he's allowed to basically eat whatever he wants. Ben tends to keep his cheat meals fairly clean, but so he's actually somewhere up north of 1,200 grams of carbs. And then on his medium days, which is his standard training day, so the other 3 days a week where he would train, he's at about 850 grams of carbs, I think was the most.
I think it's 800 flat.
Yeah, so 800, and then 75 grams of protein per meal for 6 meals.
60 on medium and then
75 on, okay. See, I just change it.
I follow.
Well, see, the thing is, the way I do the diet is we start out with a base diet, and this is what I was trying to tell clients. The numbers really don't mean anything. We have a base diet. Once we dial that in, then we know whether or not he's even counting his macros correctly. We know if he's staying lean and his weight plateaus, we add a certain percentage of calories. And so it doesn't even really matter what the numbers are. I mean, it does matter at some level, but it matters only that we get them dialed into a correct amount. And then on his low days, which is his off day, which is only 1 day a week, his protein's a lot higher, 75 grams, his carbs are much lower, and his fat's a little higher. And so it's kind of a carb cycling approach. And we didn't start right there, but by an entire year starting contest lean after contest prep and being very focused and dialed in, we were able to build his metabolism up to the point where he's eating 800 grams of carbs or 1,200 grams of carbs a day with a high amount of protein on top of it without being fat. And that allows his contest prep to basically be 2 weeks because he stays lean doing it. And then his contest prep is still more food than most people eat in the off season. So I can't stress enough the importance of being rigid and dialed in and strict in the off season with diet. And when I say strict, it doesn't mean you have to be starving, but you need to keep track of everything. That the adjustments you make can be logical and precise, where you're not just throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping something sticks.
I just want to throw in, I wasn't trying to knock Justin. I was kind of kidding about the not knowing how many grams. The reason, he probably isn't 100% on top like he usually would be. I moved to Michigan to train with Justin regularly, so we no longer do kind of your typical, online coaching. It's great, it works, but in my opinion, it's always better if you can work with somebody in person. So what's happened since I moved here, which has been the last 3-4 months, is Justin and I will train together. He'll look at me, we'll pose, he'll tell me what to do with the diet. I'll go home and note it. And we haven't been doing as much formal communication via email.
And the same thing, what I do with the diet is I don't say eat this amount, I say add 5 grams of protein per each meal, or let's bump carbs up by 100 grams on medium day. And so that's the thing is so people always worry, because you look online and I say eat 50 grams of protein a meal, and every website's going to tell you a different amount, how much chicken is 50 grams. And so I tell people you just need to be consistent. If you call 6 ounces of cooked chicken 50 grams of protein and you're eating the same foods every day, whether it's 50 or 45 or 60, it doesn't matter. If you plateau, your body fat drops and your weight starts dropping, we know we can add an ounce of protein or 5 grams of protein. It doesn't even really matter the exact number. What matters is that we're consistent with our measurements. And I say that to all my clients, but again, Ben is the perfect example of why that consistency matters, because when everything's dialed in and consistent, you're able to make incredible changes over the course. I mean, we think we've had 13 official diet revisions, probably maybe 20 diet revisions between the official new written out diets and the ones we just do verbally. And so,
At least.
yeah, and those small changes over the course of the year, when you're precise, add up to enormous, progress changes.
It's probably close to double that, honestly. Like, just making small tweaks almost all the time, and it's cool. It's really cool, actually, to see. He says, add 5 grams of protein. I'm like, what the hell is that going to do? It's not going to do anything. And you see a couple days later, it's like, wow, I look a lot better. So that's really cool, is kind of seeing how your body kind of changes in that way. So there was something else I was going to touch on. When Justin says it sounds very simple, right? It sounds simple. It sounds common sense. I've been working with Justin in some capacity. I mean, I started with Troponin back in 2010 or something. I couldn't afford to work with Justin, so I was working with one of the coaches that he coached, or one of the coaches that he hired, trained. I don't really know. So I've been following this method for almost a decade. So very easy for me to pick up. Somebody else looks at this, it might be, seem much, much more complicated than it sounds at first glance. So.
Let's go! Easy. Come on, let's go. All day. Give it up! Give it up!
Sorry, I took all your work.
Sorry, I took your work.